Since this is your fifth recording that you've been listening to, by now you probably are more alert to a lot of things around you. But let me just kind of give our live audience a little test here to make certain that you are with us. Let me ask you a question. How many of you wear a wristwatch? Can I see your hands? Okay. How many of you have had that wristwatch at least a year? Can I see your hands? Now, please don't look at the watch, but the average person looks at their watch about 100 times a day. Now, that counts the last 10 minutes before lunch and the last 10 minutes before they get off, but it's about 100 times a day. Now, that means if you've had it a year, you've looked at that watch a whole lot of times. You ought to know what's on it. How many of you in the live audience would agree you should know what's on your watch, okay? Now, don't answer these questions out loud, but you, as you listen to this tape, don't look at your watch. I want you to answer the questions to yourself. First of all, what kind of watch do you have? Second, does that wristwatch you're wearing have Roman numerals or regular numerals? Or does it have numerals at all? Are there blanks or slashes or digits or whatever? And the last question that I would ask about your watch really comes into three parts. What is straight up and down at the 12 o'clock slot? What's at the 3 o'clock slot? Get a picture in your mind. What's at the 6 o'clock slot? And what's at the 9 o'clock slot? Now I want you to carefully think that through in your own mind. And now that you have carefully thought it through, I want you, maybe for the first time since you've owned the watch, I want you to very carefully look at your watch. Now, based on the gentle murmur running through the crowd, am I right to assume that some of you missed at least one of the questions? Can I see your hands, please? Well, that seemed to be about most of you. Now, a few seconds ago when I said, now I want you to look at your watch. As a matter of fact, maybe for the first time, I want you to very carefully look at your watch. You remember me saying that just a few seconds ago? Okay, what time is it? Now, the reality is, you see, we don't really look. We don't really listen. We don't really hear. And that's the reason you will hear some things that really will bear repeating over and over. And why we keep saying, listen to these recordings over and over. Now we're going to talk about relationships because relationships have a direct bearing on your motivation in life and your attitude in life. How important are they? I love the story of the little guy that interrupted his dad, who was very busy at home working, and he tried to get his attention, and his dad kind of resisted, and finally the little boy said, Daddy said, who do you like best, Batman or Superman? And the dad said, I don't know, son. He said, oh, come on, Daddy, you like one of them best. Which one do you like the best? He said, okay. He said, I like Superman the best. And then the little boy said, okay, and he looked at his dad and said, aren't you going to ask who I like best, Dad, isn't it? And the dad said, well, all right, who do you like best? He said, I like Batman. And his dad said, well, why do you like Batman? And he said, well, Batman has got a friend. Isn't it true that's what all of us really want? Aren't our relationships so enormously important? And yet, a lot of times, over a period of time, we seem to move them to the back burner. They're not in our own minds. They're something that can wait in the process of nurturing and developing. But we get wrong information from time to time. When I was a young speaker, I heard a well-known speaker, philosopher, say that you're where you are in life because that's really where you want to be. You know, I've always liked to sound philosophical, so I started telling people you're where you are because that's where you want to be. But one night I was in Birmingham, Alabama, on my way to Meridian, Mississippi. The roads were under repair. I stopped and asked a service station attendant there, how do you get from here to there? Very kind young man, and not only told me how to get there, but drew me a little map. He said, you follow this map and it'll take you right on into Meridian. It was very important that I be there because I had an engagement the next morning. Well, an hour later, I saw another sign, and it revealed that in that 1 hour, I was now 45 miles further from Meridian than I had been when I asked for the directions. Now, I can absolutely assure you that I was not there because that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to be closer to Meridian. I was there because a well-intentioned individual had given me wrong directions. I would suggest that if you're broke and in debt and are not getting along well with the people who are important to you, that you're not where you want to be. You could be there because over a period of time, you have followed some wrong direction. Now, the question is that a lot of people ask about now is, do I really have what it takes to be successful in what I want to do? Do I have the qualities necessary? Well, let me emphasize a point. I want to use a little analogy to get you to thinking along these lines. Let's say that you had it made financially. You socked away quite a bit of money, so you wanted to build the dream house. You went to the architect, said, I want you to design me the most beautiful plans you can possibly do. And he was a world-renowned architect, and he put the plans together. They were absolutely magnificent. And then the man took the architect, they went to the best builder in town, had the best reputation, and they said to him, we want you to follow the architect's plans exactly. Use the best materials, use the best laborers, get the best carpenters, brick masons, laborers, electricians, plumbers, the very best materials, all of it. And finally, the house was complete. They moved in, had the big party. The landscaping was absolutely gorgeous. They just knew they were going to have a long, happy life there. But about 3 months later, little cracks started to appear in the walls. 6 months later, the city came in, inspected it, and said, you got to move out. We condemn the house. Now, the question is, who is at fault? Is it the builder or is it the architect? Now, as you think on this for a moment, you clearly understand it's got to be the architect. The builder had followed the directions precisely, used the best material, used the best laborers. The plan was faulty. Is there a possibility that you have got everything that you need to be enormously successful, but simply have not developed or have been listening to the wrong plans along the way? And if you got the wrong plans, the wrong direction, I don't care how many positive qualities you got, you're going to end up in the wrong place. Now, I want to emphasize something, and you've heard me say it already in these recordings several times. Failure is an event. It is not a person. Yesterday really did end last night. Today is a brand new day. Now, a lot of times people do not start well, but they end well. I was reading where British pediatrician Illingsworth points out that Yeats and Shaw were both poor spellers. Franklin, Adler, and Jung were poor mathematicians. Poe, Shelley, and Whistler were all expelled from school. Edison, at age 9, was asked to leave because he was at the bottom of the class. Gauguin was labeled a dreamer. Watt was declared dull and inept. And Einstein was mentally slow. You see, a lot of times what people do initially can be corrected. Failure really is an event. Now, as we work on attitudes and relationships, let me ask all of you a question. Now, I am 69 years old. My question to you is, am I old or young? And before you answer the question, let me ask you the next question. How many of you have any confidence at all on what the writer, Webster, of the dictionary had to say? How many of you believe Webster got some reasonably good information? Can I see your hands, please? Well, he's an authority in my life, so I went to Webster and I looked up what old and young were. Old is someone who has outgrown their usefulness. Belonging to the past. Shabby, stale. Now, am I old or young? More importantly, are you old or young? Has nothing to do really with your birthdays. Young is described by Webster to be youthfully fresh in body or mind or feeling. Significant, is it not? What I'm really talking about is an attitude here, not just about relationships, but about life, about your job, about every facet of life itself. I love what Dr. Smiley Blandon says. I have never seen a single case of senility in people, no matter how old, as long as they maintain an active interest in other human beings and in things outside of themselves. Well, by now you know that I do validate things psychologically, theologically, and physiologically, physical, mental, and spiritual, before I verbalize it, write it, or record it. I happen to check on this particular thing, and my sources say they will not go quite that far. For example, I asked the question, would it be accurate to say that Alzheimer's is a disease, but senility can be the result of choices we make? And they said, as long as you say it can be, then yes, that is absolutely on the target. Now, what are the choices we make? How do we take care of our bodies, our physical, our mental, and our spiritual life? Are we on a growth program? Because all the research I'm doing shows that the older you get, provided you remain active physically and mentally, the more creative you are, and there's no reason whatever for it simply not to happen that you do get some marvelous results when you are a senior citizen. Emerson put it this way: we don't count a man's years until he has nothing else left to count. If we remain mentally active, we remain physically active, then those birthdays are not going to be there. As I mentioned in an earlier recording, I honestly believe I'm 5, maybe 10 years away from reaching my peak. I want to be like old Caleb. You know, Caleb at age 85, and the Lord said, which part of this real estate do you want? He said, give me the mountaintop where the Philistines are. He said, I'm just like I was 40 years old. He said, put me amongst them. Well, how effective he was, I think, is visibly demonstrated by the fact that there just ain't no Philistines around today. I mean, he took care of that situation big time. Now, if we are going to accomplish anything, I believe motivation, as you've already heard me say a half dozen times, is the key. Motivation does make a difference, and motivation towards building a better relationship, building a better career, building a better family, a better community, the whole ball game is involved there. Now, there are 3 kinds of motivation. One is fear motivation. I think fear motivation is best exemplified by the story out of West Texas. Now, those of you who listen to these recordings who are not from Texas might not know this, but when Texans are rich, they just richer than anybody. I mean, they really are. Well, this was a rich Texan. Had about 65,000 acres in his spread, had about 497 producing oil wells, had about 10,000 head of cattle, and he had a magnificent mansion with an Olympic-sized swimming pool. He also had a daughter of marriageable age. He decided to throw a coming out party. Now, in sales, we call this group prospecting. He invited all of the eligible young men of the area to come to the party. Well, along about midnight, he took them outside next to the magnificent Olympic-sized swimming pool, and which he had the foresight to stock with water moccasins and alligators. He said, now, the first one of you young men who will jump into this pool and swim the length of it, he said, I'll give you 3 choices: $5 million in cash, 1,000 acres of my best land, or the hand of my beautiful daughter in marriage. Now, as you know, she is my only heir, so the one who gets her gets the whole deal. Well, about the time those words came out of his mouth, there was a loud splash at one end of the pool, followed almost immediately by the arriving at the other end of the pool of this dripping young man. The young man climbed out of the pool. The host ran to him and said, son, that's wonderful. Said, you've won. What do you want? Is it the $5 million in cash? And he said, no, sir. He said, well, do you want 1,000 acres of land with all of the oil wells on it and so forth? He said, no, sir. He said, well, do you want the hand of my daughter in marriage? And he said, no, sir. He said, well, son, what do you want? He said, I want to know the name of that dude that pushed me in a swimming pool. Now, that's called fear motivation. Now, sometimes fear motivation works with small children. For example, you tell a 7-year-old, if I ever catch you with a cigarette in your mouth, I'm going to wear you out, boy. Now, that's fear motivation, and it might have an effect. You tell a 15-year-old that, and you're just backing up. Fear motivation sometimes is effective in an employment situation where you can temporarily persuade a person that if they don't get there on time from here on in, it is all over. Fear motivation, however, does have its limitations. Where danger is involved, it's a very healthy thing. It's called fight or flight. I don't know how you feel about it. I'd a lot rather hear people say, wow, look how fast he runs. Then, boy, don't he look natural. I mean, so the running part of fear is involved. Then there is incentive motivation, and we've all seen the picture of the donkey pulling the cart, and the driver has a carrot dangling on a fishing pole right in front of the donkey's mouth. And the donkey starts pulling, and he's going to get a bite of that carrot. Well, ultimately, you got to give him a bite. Otherwise, the donkey wises up and said it's no kind of deal, and so he quits pulling. But he gets a bite of the carrot, then you got another deal. He's no longer hungry. So in order to get him to keep on pulling, you got to, shorten the stick or sweeten the carrots. You got to do something else there in order to lighten that load in order to get him to keep on pulling. There comes a time in our life when really incentive motivation kind of reaches its peak, and we no longer want the bigger house, the bigger car, the second home, and what have you. But the type of motivation that I'm going to be talking about is growth motivation. Growth motivation really is, as you're doing right now as you listen to this recording, you are learning some things that hopefully will make a difference. Now, life itself is kind of like a tire on an automobile. Most of the time when you have tire trouble, it is not a blowout. Most of the times in life when you have trouble, it is not a blowout. It's the result of a slow leak that over a period of time, all of the air goes out of the tire, and then all of a sudden one day you say, hey, I got a flat here. Well, that generally is what happens. Now, we want to emphasize here, I've been talking about self-talk a whole lot as we've gone along in this series. And basically most people are guilty of negative, not positive self-talk. I'm so amazed, 99 and 9/10% of all of the golfers who play at a 20 handicap or less will emphasize the importance of the mental aspect of the game. I think Elder Miles, who's with us this evening, would say, yep, that really is important. And I guarantee you, though, the overwhelming majority of the golfers, although they say attitude's important, they give themselves negative instruction. They miss a ball, and they say, you dummy, can't you ever do anything right? Idiot, you got to hit the ball straight or do anything, you dummy. I mean, now, what does that do to your game? What does that do? Does it improve your game? When you step up there as an idiot for your next shot, are you really going to be more effective? And the same thing is true regardless of what we're doing. Nate Lipton, my ophthalmologist, is seated here, and when he's out in my eyes, I hope he doesn't ever think along the lines of, boy, I don't know if I can do this or not. This is a tough one here in front of me. Man, I want him to think like he does, and that's optimistic, positive, and upbeat, and that's what I'm talking about. I want the talk to be a very positive self-talk. Now, we use negative phrases, like, for example, we call those electrical appliances on street corners red lights or stoplights or traffic lights, when really their major function is to make traffic go more smoothly, more safely, more orderly, and everything else. And yet, we put the negative thing on it. Now, as we go through this particular thing, and I deal with that a whole lot in the Gold series that we do as part of this, but motivation, a lot of people today claim or talk about, well, I don't have time to do anything. Well, the interesting thing is motivation creates the energy and direction creates time. Let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever had one of those days? Where, everything known to man. You wake up and you go out and you got a flat tire. You're going to change it. The only problem is that the jack is broken, and the next door neighbor, who's generally a good person to let you borrow a thing like that, is gone. You got to go across the street. You finally get it. You get down to work and you notice the office is strangely dark. The electricity has been cut off. They hook up a generator. You get the phone call. Your administrative assistant's not going to be able to make it. 2 hours later, somebody else calls in. One thing after another, all day long, you're really having it tough. Mercifully, the day ends at 5 o'clock. And so you head home, and you're not whipped, you're whooped. You've been drove hard and hung up wet. You have had it that day. You walk in and your wife greets you very enthusiastic. Oh, honey, I'm so glad you didn't have to work today. Today is the day. And you say, the day for what? Oh, honey, don't tell me you forgot. Today's the day we're going to clean the garage. Oh, honey, no, not today. Oh, don't worry about it, she said. Not going to take us more 2, 3, 4 hours at most. I'll work with you, and we'll get, oh, honey, I can't put one foot in front of another. And about that time, the telephone rings. You struggle over to it, and with the last breath of energy you've got, using both hands, you lift the telephone to the air and say hello. And the voice at the other end says, hey, partner, I got a tea time at the club in 17 minutes. If you can make it, we can get in 9 fast holds if you feel like it. If I feel like it, man alive. How many of you know exactly what I'm talking about? All right. Now, there are a lot of things we don't like to do, like cleaning the garage. So how can we kind of deal with that? I have a friend up in Lawton, Oklahoma. Her name is Edna Hennessy. She owns a big beauty parlor, beauty school, and what have you. Very upbeat, optimistic, positive, very successful lady. Her mother had been in a nursing home for some little while, and every morning at 10 o'clock, Edna would go see her mother. If somebody called for an appointment to see her at that point, she said, no, I've got to go see Mom at 10 o'clock. Then one day, her mother died. Somebody called, and she started to say, no, I've got to go see my mom. And then she said, oh, I wish I could get to go see my mom. It's amazing. It's absolutely astonishing what happens in your attitude when we change the got-tos to the get-tos. Now, when you think about that, in order to stay motivated, in other words, how can you keep the right attitude? Now, folks, I'm not talking about being on cloud 87 all the time. I'm not talking about these finger poppers that go around, you know. You wonder if all of them are there, and then you talk to them and realize it's not. That's not the kind of person I'm not talking about being high all the time. As a matter of fact, people who are high all the time or own something that's going to kill them. But I'm talking about literally getting to the position where we can do something about our attitude and keep it of a very positive nature. The other day I was walking with my middle daughter, Cindy, and we were talking as we always do. And as she walked, she said, you know, Dad, when I first started using our Performance Planner Plus, she said, I just hated that thing. Said it was a little cumbersome. I had to carry it with me everywhere I go, and I'd forget it, and I'd leave it, and I'd forget it, and I'd leave it. But she said, you know, Dad, as I started using it and disciplining myself to follow through on it, she said, I'd be absolutely helpless today without it. And she said something very significant. She says, you know, Dad, every night when I make my list and the next morning, every time I check off a task completed, she said, I feel just a little bit better about myself. Image building, motivating right there. Now, after that, I was taking a shower, and as I was taking a shower that morning, I don't sing. I've been asked not to do that even in showers. I mean, well, we do have neighbors. Those of you who recognize the name Mitch Miller, if you're old enough for that, he once wrote me a letter asking me not even to bother to sing along with, if you know what I mean. But I was thinking in the shower, and I got to think, literally what happens is the spray of the shower activates a lot of the factors in your skin, and you're physiologically energized. You feel better. And as I was there getting cleaner, I was thinking, this will clean me up and lift me up. It's a liquid massage, but it's not permanent. Sometimes people say, well, is motivation permanent? No, but neither is bathing. Now, that doesn't mean I have any opposition to bathing. As a matter of fact, I encourage it. I hope you do too. I hope you participate, I guess I should say. Especially if you use a 23-hour deodorant they've now come out with it. The people who make it say everybody's entitled to some time to themselves. There's another one called stereo, and that doesn't kill the odor, but at least you can't tell where it's coming from. So that might have some merit there. Now, motivation does the same thing to my mind. It clears my thinking. It generates creativity. It's mentally stimulating. It's emotionally uplifting, though it is not a permanent thing. It's got to be repeated, just like eating. Wouldn't it be wonderful if our minds growled when it was beginning to have a difficulty, like our stomach does when it's running a little bit empty? Well, motivation, you see, energizes, it brings on creativity, it makes you friendlier, it makes you more productive. That has a direct bearing on the things we've been talking about all the way through. That is, everybody wants to be happy and healthy and at least reasonably prosperous and secure. They want to have friends, peace of mind, good family relationships, and hope that the future is going to be better. Well, the motivation is definitely a contributing factor in that. And you might say, well, I don't necessarily love my job. Again, I refer you back to Edna Hennessy. If we'll change the expression from got to get to, it'll make a difference. I well remember a number of years ago, my wife and son and I were in a steakhouse having dinner, And as we first sat down, the busboy came along, to put the ice water in for us. And then this young man slashed the water and ice out and slashed it in the second and third one. And I just looked at him. I said, "Don't like your job, huh?" He said, "No, I don't." I said, "Well, don't worry about it." I said, "You're not going to have it very long." I don't know if any of you ever saw any of those old slapstick movie comedies where you'd have a waiter, and he's doing something here and something goes astray, and he runs back quickly and he disappears in the kitchen, and then he turns around and instantly comes back out. Well, that's what that kid did. He scowled his way in and came out. The kid was grinning so wide like he'd walked through a swinging door on somebody else's push. I mean, he was excited, and he came over, and this time he poured the water gently. Now, he realized that he wasn't going to have that job long with that attitude. Now he gets to put the water in the glass instead of has to put the water in the glass. You see, we really do live in a spoiled society, folks. We've been raised to believe that if it doesn't look good, taste good, smell good, and be fun to do, then we really should not have anything to do with it. We really want instant gratification on everything, and that's really the sign of an immature individual. Patience is one of those qualities we've already talked about as far as success is concerned. I don't believe there's a human being alive who loves to do what they do as much as I love to do what I like to do. Now, I get excited about a lot of things. The redhead says I get excited reading the phone book. Now, I don't think that is quite true, but I love what I do. But I don't love to do some of the things that are involved in it, where I have a 5-hour delay and I'm seated out on the runway, air conditioning in the airplane is not working. I don't get overly motivated about that. But there's nothing I can do about that, so now I can either sit there and chew and fuss and gripe and complain, or I can do what I learned years and years ago to do, and that is to always have something that I can constructively work on when the unexpected happen. And so I will always make it a positive instead of a negative experience. It's called discipline. Now, discipline is a word that a lot of people don't care a whole lot about today. But when you discipline yourself to do the things you need to do when you need to do them, the day is going to come when you can do the things you want to do when you want to do them. Consider this. The sailor only has freedom of the seas when he's absolutely disciplined to be completely obedient to the compass. Until he obeys the compass, he's got to stay within sight of the shore. But the moment he trusts the compass and is obedient to it, he can go anywhere in the world. The boat will let him go. Now the question is the one who is close to the shore because he's not obedient to the compass, is that the one who's free? Or is it the one who trusts and is obedient to the compass and can go anywhere in the world they want to go? I think the answer is self-answering, is it not? Suppose you're not really in love with the job you do. You can fall in love with the way you do the job. And you see, when you fall in love with the way you do the job, it's just a question of time when you will like certain aspects of the job better. And then one or two things will happen. They will either move you up to a better job or you will be given a better job somewhere else. The law clearly states it. That when you do more than you're paid to do, that someday you will be paid more for what you do. I love what this little article says right here. For years, the Boston Globe carried on its editorial page this wise observation. I'm an old man and have had many troubles. Most of them never happened. Expectancy is so important. Robert W. DeGraff says this about your job. He says, be thankful for the troubles of your job. They provide about half your income. Because if it were not for the things that go wrong, the difficult people you have to deal with, and the problems and unpleasantness of your working day, someone could be found to handle your job for half of what you're being paid. It takes intelligence, resourcefulness, patience, tact, and courage to meet the troubles of any day. That is why you hold your present job, and it may be the reason you aren't holding down an even bigger one. If all of us would start to look for more troubles and learn to handle them cheerfully and with good judgment as opportunities rather than irritations, we would find ourselves getting ahead at a surprising rate. It is the fact that there are plenty of big jobs waiting for men and women who aren't afraid of the troubles connected with them. I get to instead of I got to. You will learn to love your job, and then you'll get better at the job, and then you'll either get the better job or another opportunity. Attitude's so important. I love what John Maxwell, a good friend of mine, says. Never underestimate the power of your attitude. It is the advanced man of our true selves. Its roots are inward, but its fruit is outward. It is our best friend or our worst enemy. It is more honest and more consistent than our words. It has an outward look based on past experiences. It is a thing which draws people to us or repels them. It is never content until it is expressed. It is the librarian of our past, it's the speaker of our present, and it's the prophet of our future. Now what I'm suggesting is a change in thinking, am I not? See, it's an old saying, if you keep on doing what you've been doing, you're going to keep on getting what you've been getting. Now if you like what you've been getting, that's okay. If you don't like what you've been getting, we better recognize maybe the reason for it is we got to do things instead of we get to do things. Now, most people that I'm talking to would be in denial. They would deny that that's the way they think. And again, they think, denial is just a river in Egypt. They deny, those basic things there. And so we need to look at it in that relationship or in that light. Now, if we're going to have relationship motivation, and we're going to talk a whole lot about that at this point, but here's my observation and the observations of many, many other people. If you're getting along well with the people you love, almost regardless of how the rest of your life is going, overall you're a pretty happy camper. If you're not getting along with the people you love, regardless of how many bucks you got in the bank and regardless of your corporate position, overall you just simply are not a very happy camper. Those relationships are enormously important. My friends who are in counseling in the church and in psychology and psychiatry tell me that nearly 100% of all of the counseling they do is a direct result of relationship problems. Husband, wife, parent, child, employer, employee, teacher, student, brother, sister, and what kind of thing. Well, why is that so? Why do we have so much relationship difficulty? I think the major problem started maybe 40 years ago when as a group, as a nation, as a people, we started adopting the hooray for me, to heck with you, I'm going to do it my way. If I have to win through intimidation, I'm going to look out for number one. I've just described the most miserable human being imaginable. I challenge you, show me one happy person who is self-centered. Invariably, when your thoughts are on yourself, you're not a happy, productive individual. A number of years ago, I was bowling in Omaha, Nebraska, and injured my right knee. One of my friends, who is not overly bright, to be kind to him, mentioned something about age. Now, that's where his lack of brightness shone the brightest, because, you see, there was nothing at all wrong with my left knee. So age obviously had nothing whatever to do with it. Well, anyhow, I injured my right knee. That evening I was to speak. And as I came hobbling out, and they had a microphone with a cord on it, I was hobbling out, and I could just feel the audience say, well, look at old Zig. Bless his heart, he's all crippled up. But I bet he's going to do the best he can. I know he's going to. Oh, I could just feel it in the audience. They hung the microphone around my neck, and to this day I do not clearly understand what the therapeutic effect of having a microphone around your neck does to your knee. But there was an instant healing. I mean, that sucker quit hurting right then and there. And for the next 60 minutes, I was up and down, roundabout, stooping, squatting, shouting. I was doing it all. In the 60 minutes, they took the mic off my neck, and I stepped off the platform and collapsed. Literally. Now, what happened? For 60 minutes, I wasn't thinking about Zig. I was thinking about the audience. And I don't remember doing this consciously, but apparently when I stepped off the platform, I was thinking, okay, Zig, man, now think about yourself, and boom, down I went. I can guarantee that people who are completely self-centered are miserable human beings. Now, the basic problem is to say we do live in that self-centered, pretty selfish world. And yet, what we do with our life is so dependent on other people. In my office, I have what I call my wall of gratitude. There are 19 people who've had a substantial influence on my life. I wonder where I would be had it not been for those 19 people. You show me anybody in life who's done anything at all, and I will show you somebody who's had a lot of help getting there. As this old boy down home would say, friend, when you see a turtle on a fence post, you can rest assured that sucker didn't get there by himself. I mean, he had some help going there. Now, motivation is important, but there is negative motivation as well as positive. As you recall, in the early recording, I talked about the fact that when you hear a motivational presentation on success, that your brain is literally flooded with dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin, and the neurotransmitters and so forth, and you're physiologically energized. Unfortunately, for some people, gambling produces the same results. Pornography produces the same results. Rock music a lot of times produces the same results. But basically what you're doing, you're energized and activated to go do the wrong thing. Dr. Forrest Tunnett, a good friend of mine, I consider the number one brain chemist perhaps in America, certainly the number one drug authority in America. He says if you can put all of those neurotransmitters in there with positive directions on what to do with your life, then you're going to get some marvelous results. You see, when you listen to things over and over that advise you to abuse a woman or kill a cop, or try the suicide solution, over a period of time, it definitely is going to have some negative results. Motivation can be negative, but it can also be tremendously and powerfully positive. And that's the content and the concept in this program, is to make the motivation powerful, including the directions on how to get the things out of life you really want. But back to relationship motivation, because it's so important. I want to kind of set up a little scenario which identifies the problem and offers a solution at the same time. It's Friday afternoon in this little scenario. The husband has been out of town all week. It's about 5 o'clock. He gets to the front porch. He's laden with luggage, and he has his briefcase bulging with work which he's got to do. He doesn't want to set the briefcase and luggage down to ring the doorbell, so he kicks the door. Now, he doesn't gently kick it. He bang, 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 bang. Well, his wife comes to the front door, somewhat startled, sees him standing there, and he doesn't move. He just said, I've been to a meeting. That's the reason I'm late. I'm glad I went to that meeting because I learned some things that just bother the hang out of me. I learned that there's some rights around this house that I have not been getting. I have made a list of them. And the first thing you and I are going to do, woman, we're going to sit down. We're going to make some changes around here. You can absolutely count on it. Well, I can just imagine in this scenario, the wife said, well, Buster, I didn't go to a meeting. I didn't have to go. And I don't have a list written out. I've got them burned indelibly into my mind. You can count on that. You bet I want you to come on in, because there are going to be some changes around here. You can count on it. And I don't think you're going to like all of them. Don't you know they had a wonderful, loving, fun-filled weekend? Don't you know that on Monday morning they each awakened, raring and ready to go and get out there and turn the world upside down in a very positive way? Same scenario. Same husband. Friday afternoon, 5 o'clock. This time, instead of kicking the door down, he gently taps it. His wife comes to the door, and he says, sweetheart, the reason I'm late is I've been to a meeting, and I'm so glad I did, because I learned some things that troubled me a great deal. I learned that undoubtedly I've not been meeting all of the needs which you have. And what I'd like for us to do, before we do anything else this weekend, I would like for us to sit down And I would like for you to share with me how I can become the husband you deserve to have and that you thought you were getting when we got married. I can well imagine her saying, well, you know, it's interesting you mentioned that. I've kind of been thinking about the same thing. That maybe I've not been meeting all of your needs. Let's sit down and talk about it. Doesn't need an elaboration, does it? See, the reality is you really can have everything in life you want if you will just help enough other people get what they want. When you put that other person first, amazing things happen. Now, I don't want to, in any sense of the way, as you listen to these recordings, I don't want to hang a guilt trip on anybody. That's somebody else's department. I'm not talking about the past. I'm talking about the present and using it as preparation for the future. Most of us, when we did what we did in the past that was wrong, we did it at that time based on our circumstances at that time, and more importantly, the information we had at that time. As you've heard me say several times in this series, we got to make friends with our past so we can focus on the present in order to make the future what it is capable of being. I love this particular story about Thomas Carlyle, who lived from 1795 until 1881. He was a Scotch essayist and historian. On October 17, 1826, he married his secretary, Jane Welch. She was a very intelligent person and worked directly with him. But she was a person who took ill. And over a period of time then, after several years, she had to quit doing the work. And Carlyle, although he loved her dearly, he seldom had time to spend with her. He was always busy with his work. And then one day, she died. They took her to the cemetery. They buried her. Carlyle came back home. He was sitting in remorse on the side of her bed, and he saw her diary, which was open. And he started reading in it. The first notation he saw: yesterday he spent an hour with me, and it was like heaven. I love him so. He turned the page. I've listened all day to hear his steps in the hall, but now it is late, and I guess he won't come today. Carlyle read a little more in the book, then he threw it down and ran out of the house. Some of his friends found him at the graveside, his face buried in the mud, bitterly weeping those tears. The next 15 years of his life, he did very little. He was a recluse, non-productive. I say this, I don't share this with you to hang any guilt trips on anybody. Remember, the past is exactly that. I'm talking about planning for the future. We need to invest our time well. Relationships is one of the things that are so incredibly important. One recent study revealed that of all the things people want in life, 97 8/10% of them said their family relationships, better relationships, was number one. When asked the question, how much time do you spend planning to have better relationships? How much time do you set aside for your family? And most of them came to the conclusion, or literally said, well, you know, I'm going to do it. It just seems that I never have time. Most important thing. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but that's human nature. We let the urgency of the moment, because we do not have a plan. You remember, we talked about how much more we get done on the day before vacation than we do on any other day. Take the same principle, and then we plan the time with the family. We plan the time for exercise. We plan the time to get involved in personal growth and development as you have done.